Here.
Vice Chairman Majak?
Here.
Member Yount?
Here.
Member Tucker?
Here.
Member Perez?
Here.
Member Delgado?
Here.
Member Fliss?
Here.
Alternate Member Young.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and, we have a quorum, so let's do the pledge of allegiance.
Of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Next we have the approval of the minutes. Anybody want to make a motion?
I would make a motion that the minutes need to be corrected. There's a huge chunk of content that seems to be missing, in particular, Mr. Johnson's PowerPoint presentation. The salient points of that presentation and the data he presented should at least have landed in the minutes. Something more than just a sentence of Mr. Johnson gave his presentation and we voted on accepting it.
All right, well, why don't you make a motion to approve the minutes, and let's get a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, the motion was made by Member Majak and seconded by Member Perez. All those in favor, no, we're gonna have a discussion first. Okay, go for it.
Well, I think that given the amount of time that we spent and the accuracy of the data that was presented, and the fact that we could in real time show that the presentation of the data was not uploaded to the DEP website, that told me that the data was at least worthy of review and further study. And it should have landed in the minutes, and it didn't. And I find that to be disgraceful to both Mr. Johnson and to the TEC.
Any other comments? Would it be possible to have a little bit more of, not a little bit more, but could we have an explanation of Mr. Johnson's presentation?
Were they provided to staff? Was it provided to staff?
Electronically must have been because
Well,
it was presented here.
I know that his pictures were, but I don't know whether the presentation itself
Printed out and uploaded on Laserfish. Okay. So it's public record.
Would it be okay to include that in the minutes then?
How do you want to include them in minutes?
I think the salient, I would recommend that the salient points of his presentation, summary conclusion perhaps, should at least itself have been in the minutes. But points that Mr. Johnson had made and documented and provided us with, if I remember right, it was 32 signatures that you had in a petition from people who had witnessed this. It doesn't matter exactly. The point was that there was data presented to us, and there's nothing in the minutes that one would ever think to go back and look further. So that's what I would like to see.
There was an actual presentation. What was he using, PowerPoint or?
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, there is stuff available, so it's digitally available as
Correct.
well.
This is pretty standard for presentation to just state that it was given as part of the record. If you want more language about what was stated exactly in the minutes itself, we're open to suggestions specifically as to what to add in there.
Well, Brad, when a citizen comes up to speak at petitions and requests, we document what they say in the minutes.
Yes, so it says the presentation was given, so if they'd like to see the presentation, we can certainly give it to them.
I would, well, I think a summary conclusion should at least end after the presentation was given, if you're not going to include the presentation.
Well, you're suggesting to include a summary. We'd like to know exactly what you'd like to say.
You know, I mean, there's a list of points that were covered that are very easily bulleted. You know, doesn't have to be a whole lot of
So the bullets from a particular slide should be added into the minutes? Because we can't anticipate what you'd like us to put in the minutes. You have to give us
Right,
specifics.
okay, so-
How you'd like to be corrected.
Yeah, here I'm learning too, okay, so let me throw some things out. Okay, so Mr. Johnson pulls up slide. Sewage spill, picture of sewage spill on street X and X. Okay, slide number 2, sewage spill in the following street. So, you know, just to note the fact that this actually happened and that there's, you know, information on the audio if people want to turn to, that they can go to. But there was a bunch of stuff that he brought out that can certainly be bulleted, you know, boom, 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 which is, I think, what we're asking for.
So I'm trying to bring up his presentation from Laserfish. It's part of the record right now. And this is in the agenda packet, or was attached later, Lori?
Mr. Johnson presented the presentation digitally. I printed it to have a copy for the public record, plus we still have the digital copy.
Was it printed, and how was it created? Is a digital record inside Laserfish?
I printed it and scanned it into Laserfish.
Okay, so we need to look for that, and I can identify or ask you which slide in particular you'd like to have summarized or restated inside the minutes specifically.
Member Young has his slide on, let's hear what he has to say, and then I'll take a crack at trying to summarize it.
Well, this is just 2 things. One, provide a note in the minutes that the full presentation can be found at X, or simply attach the slides to the minutes.
I don't think we can attach the slides to the minutes.
Why?
That's not something the secretary or the clerk's office.
Well, in that case, we keep saying we want a summary in the minutes, but we're going to have to provide them with that summary. We would have to write that, or someone who was here, and then they can put it in. But we're saying put something in, and they're saying, what do you want to put in? And we say put something in, and they say, what do you want to put in? So, I mean,
Let me take
Just
a
write something
crack.
down,
Just,
put
let's
it
say
in.
that, Mr. Johnson's presentation included slides that showed evidence of a sanitary sewer overflow that occurred in the Baker subdivision area of Titusville. And I think that's all you need. And like Member Young suggested, you know, the presentation can be found, blah, blah, blah.
Lori, did you get that? So that language we can add to the minutes? Okay.
I think that would make us very happy.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so are there any other changes to the minutes that anybody needs to bring up? If not, do we need a roll call? Go ahead, Mr. Delgado, sorry.
I'm sorry, there were some minutes that were attributed to what I said, but they were totally incomplete. And they were chopped off into a paragraph that was totally incoherent.
Can you
It's the
identify?
best way that I can put it.
Yeah.
Can you identify which statements?
Well, it was a conversation between Mike and myself, and we were talking about the subject matter, and the subject was, how do you get information to council? Okay, and at what level?
Can you identify on the minutes where you would like the change?
It's a great big paragraph that was in the copy that I got,
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm looking for it.
Possibly on page 11?
Possibly. I don't remember the page, I don't remember reading it.
maybe you can help us narrow down as to which topic you were talking about, which agenda item?
I just said that, it was talking about how to present and at what level to council, and that was a discussion that was happening at the board at the time.
So I'm looking at the minutes and I don't see that as a listed agenda item title. I see old business, urban tree canopy assessment recommendations. I also see forested wetlands as an agenda item. Was it under the canopy discussion?
It was.
No,
No.
Rachel's right, it's on page 11, Brett, and it's actually verbatim of what you said, Member Delgado. And it's included, remember when you sent me the verbatim section of the minutes?
I did. I asked the
It's in
secretary
that.
to do a verbatim of a 10-minute section of the meeting that you had so that we could better understand what was discussed at that particular discussion item.
Mhm. So this is actually what you said, word for word. And by virtue of it being sent to the chair for a discussion with Mr. Parrish, it is actually in the minutes, which is rare. We should be having a party.
We could do the whole minutes, but we just needed that relevant section.
I just have a different subject first. But if that's the case, then, like I said, when I read it and going back in my mind as to what happened during that discussion, it seemed to me like it was chopped up. You know, there were pieces of it. And so, but I just wanted to bring it up because, like I said,
This is, from what I'm seeing on page 11 of your packet, which is
and I'm there.
page 4 of that verbatim section of your last meeting, and it's begins with Delgado hyphen okay that needs.
Yes.
Okay, that is a verbatim word for word of what was discussed.
I think the answer to Mr. Parrish's question under topic was the urban tree canopy. On page 5, I think is where it all started.
There was a particular section of your discussion at your last meeting that talked about 6 recommendations about the Planet Geo tree canopy assessment report that was given to City Council, and then your recommendations that you provided to it regarding that assessment to Council. And seemed to be a relevant discussion about why those 6 recommendations were important. And that's why we asked the secretary to do a verbatim of just that portion of your meeting so that we could better understand what was discussed.
And if I remember correctly, Member Delgado, you also made comments about how can we make sure that our comments to the city council don't get changed or altered.
Correct.
That part of your discussion
That's
is
fine.
not included here.
But that is somewhere in the body of this, by the way. Not in this discussion,
Right.
but in the minutes.
If somebody asked for the audio of the meeting, it would be on the audio. This is extremely rare to see verbatim discussion appear in the minutes.
But that discussion, and that discussion came about because of what happened at the city council meeting.
I understand. I believe you're concerned, maybe your particular discussion you're concerned about was at a different part in the meeting and was not part of this 10-minute segment that we did.
Exactly.
That's possible.
My point.
So on the regular minutes then, are you asking for a change? So the regular minutes, the standard minutes begin on page 4 of your packet and go on to page 8 of your packet. I'm sorry, page 7. So between page 4 and 7. Is there a particular section of the summary minutes that you're concerned about, you'd like to have changed?
Or added.
As Member Tucker mentioned, it says discussion took place amongst the TEC members regarding how they did not feel that City Council gave adequate consideration on each of the 6 recommendations they made. That may be the statement.
wanna give them a sentence or two about what you'd like added, they'll add it, but I think at this point, a lot of work has been done behind the scenes to try to smooth over, the hurt feelings that occurred as a result of our last meeting. I personally, at this point, don't think we need to keep beating a dead horse. I think.
No, but I think it's
move on.
And Madam Chairman, I agree with you. But the bottom line is we haven't resolved the issue. Okay, the issue that I raised is, how do we keep things like that from happening? And I asked that question specifically. Okay, and that hasn't been approached, that hasn't been resolved, in my opinion. If it hasn't been resolved, we have to close the door, it's fine. Okay, but I have no knowledge of it. Okay, and I also proposed to the board the fact that how do we, the board, send to the council in some concise manner what our feelings are.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't think that has been resolved either, because that's a process issue. Okay, that hasn't been resolved.
Mr. Del, are you on topic on that's something else on the agenda, or are you talking about what was missing in the language or summary inside these minutes? Are you suggesting something that should be added?
What I'm suggesting is perhaps it's in the wrong place. Okay? Because I think that was part of the conversation that had to do with what transpired at the city council meeting. So it should be part of that portion of the tree canopy issue. Yes. The six things that we sent out, of which only one was talked about. Okay, and I'm not talking about the reasons, but we were talking about how do we improve as a board, how we convey what we're sending up to the council so that it gets there and it gets talked to.
So what would you like to add to the minutes?
Without having to repeat myself. Okay, it was a discussion that took place among us on how to avoid ones that have to happen again, and secondly, how to present the very case to council.
So that is what's missing from these minutes?
I think so.
What you just said?
Yes.
So what we can do, if you want to make a motion on approving these minutes, today you can with what was just stated by you. I probably need to repeat it again for the secretary to be able to make sure she has it right. Or you can make a motion to allow us to add this information in there, and then you can approve these minutes at your next meeting.
I think the latter would be better. And again, this is not about emotions or feelings. This is about process.
Right, and all we're talking about right now is what to do about amending or correcting the minutes.
I would take the latter option.
Okay.
And look at it later.
You have a motion on the table right now to approve these minutes with discussion. So you would have to ask whoever made the motion here to withdraw and second to withdraw, and then make a new motion to have this amended with it being tabled at your next meeting to be considered for approval later.
Okay. Mike?
Yep, I'm fine with that. I'll withdraw my motion. Second withdrawal too?
Second.
No, it was a withdrawal. The person that first seconded it must unsecond it. So
Third.
Oh, you are in second. Okay, I thought it was you bet. My bad.
Don't confuse me, I'm definitely confused.
All right, motion to table the minutes until the details from Member Delgado's salient discussion on policy and process for getting things to and from City Council from TPC should be amended.
So, Mr. Delgado, if you make or someone makes a motion to that
I just
effect,
did.
You made that motion?
That was the motion.
Okay.
That you amend the minutes from what you already have recorded on the section that Member Delgado is discussing about our discussion about what the process and policy will be for how things come from the TEC to City Council, and when they're not, what we can complain about and how.
For clarification, does the secretary understand what that motion
Yeah, can you make it simpler?
The motion is to table the minutes, review to the next meeting, so that staff can include the verbatim section on the discussion of policy and process.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Delgado beat everybody. So the motion was made by member Byjack and seconded by member Delgado to table the minutes of the March 15th meeting until our next TEC meeting, so that the verbatim section where member Delgado was talking about the process and how we can improve the process for reaching the city council gets done. So basically, we're tabling the minutes until the section where Mr. Delgado made his comments can also be added verbatim the same way that the tree discussion was added.
So just so you understand, verbatim took several hours just for those 10 minutes for our secretary to do that. I think that a better direction for our secretary is to maybe just summarize that section about the discussion about process that Mr. Yockel mentioned. Just look back at those minutes. Maybe we summarize it in a few sentences that we can add it to this and bring us back to your meeting. Or we can do that, but I think verbatim is going to be, we're not sure how much of a verbatim we're going to look at. I think it's going to be very difficult for our secretary to be able to follow that.
Yeah, I understand. I agree. I mean, I know where he's talking about. It was specifically where he's talking about the process, but I listened to the tape twice. So, and I think possibly Kay St. On may have the stuff already verbatim transcripted, because she does that with every meeting. But I'm okay with a summary. But it sounds like the TEC members would like that part of the meeting also to be included in the minutes.
Can I just clarify something for myself? This had to do with the portion of the council meeting that Broom split. That's what we're talking about, right? Okay, yeah, I agree. You know, there was discussion on that, and we don't have a full decision of, that we should have had.
So the motion is to make it verbatim. I'm telling you that it's going to be difficult for our staff to do that. So I would recommend that your motion allow us to do a summary that we can propose to you on that topic and add it to your minutes for your next meeting.
I would agree to a summary, provided member Delgado gets a review of it before we see it at the TEC meeting.
I actually have some verbatim, and we may be able to resolve this right now. So from 1 hour and 16 minutes and 50 seconds to 1 hour, 30 minutes and 22 seconds, it says, Member Fliss thinks we need to move forward. This was after I had said, please, let's just move forward and let this go. And Member Fliss agreed. Member Delgado disagrees that a precedent being started with this, what happened, could happen again with wetlands. So we should address and look at recommendations, or so that address how recommendations could be overlooked and separated and not voted on. That's the whole gist of where the problem is. And so I think that's, I'm not down to Lori. Is that okay with you?
I'll be okay.
Okay, there you go, Lori.
Thank you.
Yes, so that sentence, it needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but it's not exactly, but somebody whoever, they can add a couple of verbs or whatever it needs to make it where it makes sense, but that sentence, I think, is all we need to be added.
So I need to amend my motion to include.
Yeah, let's try to get this done.
All right.
Before you start, does the secretary understand?
Yes, that's very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, it should shorten the 2-hour time limit down to.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so do we?
So the motion would then be, assuming Tom is gonna withdraw, if I withdraw. So I made the last one and Member Delgado seconded. Would you like the honor of doing this one, sir? I don't know why.
Chairwoman,
Yes, ma'am.
Stan Johnson has turned in a card to speak about this.
About the minutes? Is it about the minutes? Okay, call the cards.
Stan Johnson.
Is it on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Stan Johnson. Our last council meeting, or the two council meetings before that, I was asked to make a presentation on the sewage spill. So, the presentation that I made included photos and so forth. But in addition to photos, I have videos. And so I didn't present to you evidence of the sewage spill. I want to correct you. I presented proof of the sewage spill. It's authenticated and by all these photos, and I am as a witness, and there's many more other witnesses. So I just want to correct you that what I presented was not evidence, but proof. Big difference. And the thing is that right now is that I presented it to council when the sewage spill was occurring, even photos, so forth. And so there's many witnesses who are city employees of this. And city manager still denies it, and city council, it appears to me they deny it too. They won't respond. And if some of you saw what happened at the meeting last night, you understand is that there's a big problem because this was a sewage spill in 9 city streets, and many homes were, because of the hurricane, had stormwater that was in people's yards. So it was in many people's yards too. So we're talking about a sewage spill that was a big deal, and it was also in the fountain at the senior center. So it was, and they turned that fountain off. It was like, and that was an admission that they knew it was on, because I called the senior center, and apparently somebody made a complaint, and so the city turned off that fountain. So that's like an admission of guilt. And yet the city, although I've reported also to Titusville Police Department and FDEP. So I'm asking you to, that the minutes should reflect that actually I was presenting the, not just facts, but proof. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comment to that is that we have now added to the minutes the fact that your presentation was proof that there was a sewage spill.
Thank you. That's all.
I have a question for Mr. Johnson. Stan, if I recall, the date that you recorded that was September 29th? Do you remember the date?
I have to look. What I have is I have a field book that has a dialogue on that. But I believe the first time that I sent it to the city was maybe like October the 1st or 2nd, something like that. The photos might have been October. I saw it in September.
Right.
But I didn't take the photo. Pardon?
That's the sheet you turned in.
That's the timeline.
Oh, does it have?
Yeah.
So it's in here.
It starts on your timeline on September 29th.
Okay, so
And
that.
it goes forward from there. But there's no record at all. As I said,
Record.
at the last TEC meeting, as I told you,
Oh.
I looked up the DEP announcements for reported spills, and Titusville does not have a reported spill in that time frame.
Well,
with the DEP.
I'm not sure. I might even have the number for the call, but I made calls to FDEP.
Right.
But
the report has to come through the city. The citizen can't simply report it. It doesn't get recorded if a citizen reports. It has to be done through the city, through channels.
I agree.
So what I want to do is follow up with, since we have this evidence, I want to know why it's not in the DEP, not listed as a sewage spill. And I guess that's my question for staff, is I want to know the history of this, because obviously we addressed it because there's sandbags around the lift station, and you can see where materials are mixing that shouldn't be out in the open. And if we went so far as to put sandbags around it, then the city was acknowledging that something was there. Now, why it wasn't reported to DEP, that's what I want to know. I want to understand the process. I want to understand the metrics. I want to know how we measure these things, when we measure these things, and what trips the scale of notifying DEP and what doesn't. That's what I'd like to know.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Stan.
Vice Chair Majak, well, that was very eloquently stated. I would like to remind you that we are on the topic of approving minutes,
Yes,
and
we just had a citizen come up and make a request.
yes,
And I think the
but I
points
would,
that the
if we
citizen
could
made.
tie it back to the minutes and how we can get us past approving the minutes. Would you like to add a statement about this in the minutes? Would you like to add it back onto your agenda? I'm just trying to help us move the meeting along.
Put it back on the agenda for the next
Let's
meeting.
do that.
Then I recommend you bring that up in
Yeah.
discussion of
You made
future
the same
agenda
request. See,
items.
this is twice now, 2 meetings in a row, we've made the same request. So we'll put it on the agenda.
Is there any more cards?
Yes.
Lori?
Christine Lorty?
Sorry, my writing is bad. Kristen Lortie, Lortie. Cocoa resident, Titusville supporter, and interested in this topic, so my comments will pertain to the minutes. I want to offer a contrast in what happened in Cocoa with a similar, kind of situation. I presented a presentation to the city of Cocoa for one of their workshops on February 23rd. I sent in a comment, and I sent in 2 attachments, and I asked that it be included as an e-comment in the meeting minutes. Everything was included in the meeting minutes. My written comment, the presentations, is all in the meeting minutes that were approved at last night's meeting. I do not understand why it's so difficult to just include the entire presentation, because the burden that you put now onto the public is that if I see that reference or I see that summary, now I have to go do more work to go and locate the presentation itself. And I feel that's an unnecessary burden to be placed on residents and then for the city to have to do the work to summarize when the initial suggestion was, let's just include the presentation. I personally have had this recently happen to me in Titusville, where I submitted an attachment and asked it to be included in the meeting minutes for the city council strategic workshop, which I'll be commenting on in a moment, but the city doesn't allow attachments or citizen comments, whether they're emailed or written. They do not allow them to be included directly in the minutes. And I feel it does a disservice to citizens, and I'm interested in Mr. Johnston's presentation now, and now I have to take extra steps to actually get the presentation. So I just feel it puts an undue burden onto the citizens, and I would like to see Titusville be more inclusive in records and make them more easy for the public to access and not have to do so much work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lordy. Okay, have we reached a point where we can approve the minutes?
Motion to table the minutes.
Motion to table.
Is it, since Lori now has Mr. Delgado's words from the meeting, that was the gist of what we were tabling about, do we still need to table the minutes, or can we go forward?
Well, they haven't included it in the minutes yet, so they were gonna bring it back next month. It's gonna take some time for Lori. It's gonna take some time for Lori to include them in the minutes for us to review them again, so yes, we should table.
Is that to say that we can't approve them with a caveat that those things be included?
Can I make a statement, Mr. Chairman? So the secretary, the last motion was to withdraw that last motion. Okay, so there's no motion on the table right now. So
No,
you
I
have
made
2
a-
changes.
I made a motion to approve
Yes,
that addition to the minutes,
yes.
but we didn't approve the minutes.
No, you have, that's what I'm getting at. So you have the motion that you had made to include the second change Ms. Lorelei Thompson submitted for summarizing Mr. Delgado's discussion. Plus, you also have the change before that about adding Stan Johnson's a summary of his PowerPoint presentation. So your motion should include both, and then a second, and then you can approve or other action.
Yes, yeah, all of those, as you just iterated, should be included in the minutes next time.
All right, did anybody second that? I didn't write it down, I'm sorry.
I'll second.
All right, oh, that's right, Mr. Delgado, okay. So, the motion is on the table to approve the minutes of the March 15th meeting with the addition of a summary of Mr. Johnston's presentation and the location where it can be found, and also the inclusion of Mr. Delgado's comments. The motion was made by member Myjack, seconded by member Delgado. All those in favor say aye. Or do
Aye.
we need a roll call? No, okay. Everybody that's okay with that, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved with the changes. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along. Yeah, okay. Petitions and requests from the public present. Does anybody want to speak?
Pass this on, this is evidence. Stan Johnson, 860 Poinsett Avenue. I want to let you know about some of what happened last night. The fact is, I sent an email April 11th to PPC and council and so forth, and it's titled this. It says, unlike Brevard County and Satellite Beach, Titusville Council denies dangers and denies sewage spills into people's yards, 9 city streets, and pollution of our Indian River. Shame on City Council. So that's the title. And so what I did was, someone sent me a Florida Today article by Mr. Raymer about the sewage spill in Brevard County, Satellite Beach. And they did things very differently than the city of Titusville. Not only did they post signs, they went door to door and so forth. Whereas in the city of Titusville, the signs posted were very different. The city of Titusville didn't say contaminated water, it says may be contaminated and so forth. So it was very, very different, and that sign said no swimming, no other things, no fishing, so forth. And so I'm going to read to you a paragraph in this same email, and it reads as follows. But in Titusville, no notification is distributed to homeowners. I'm talking about, actually, there's more than one spill. This spill in October and September, and also the one, there's a lot of that was not notified in the spill that was in December the 19th and into the year 2020. No, excuse me, 2020 and 2021. But in Titusville, no notification is distributed to homeowners for the sewage spill mixed with stormwater lasting long after Hurricane Ian from September into October 22 into 9 city streets and in front of over 50 homes and covering most of the yards of many homes. Sewage is in their yards. From Greenwood Street to the Senior Pond Park, killing fish. There were some dead fish in the pond. And then into flooded yards of Temple Drive and into Park Avenue, and then separated into 2 outfalls into the Indian River. Went into CRA, went into the river, and went on the CRA area. City posted no signs and did nothing to notify any residents. In fact, well, I did. You know, I sent all these. I put signs on the doors to City Hall. All 3 of these went on the door, City Hall, went on to courthouse, numerous churches and homes. So, and also I went to put on the door of Florida Today. One of them, and Vera. City posted no signs, did nothing to notify any residents. In fact, despite photos sent to council members, videos, a police report of the spill, and many witnesses and evidence still remain on site of the spill, city manager, city council, and city water resources continue to falsely report and deny that this spill ever happened. I'm asking you guys to do something about it. City council denies and covers up the sewage spill that they received photos of. And I've got videos of it coming out of the sewage, coming out of the manholes, coming out of the lift station. Videos. City's dishonesty and false reports jeopardize the health, safety, and welfare of the public. and that's what I'm licensed to protect as a professional engineer. So I'm reporting to you as a professional engineer. It's my license. City of Titusville, with all of its millions of dollars, cannot get anybody to dispute me. And they don't intend to. Because if they get somebody up there, they're going to agree with me, I'm afraid, an expert. If they don't, I just report to the board. So we've got a situation which, you know, I don't know how sympathetic I can be with the city council, because it appears that they feel like, I want you to understand is that sewage from your house is different than sewage from the city. Sewage from 100 different people is different than sewage from 5,000 people. The sewage that went on the 20 and 21 sewage bill, 7.2 million gallons, was a lot more different kinds of pollution. And you don't think of sewage as sewage as you see in let's say, coming from a few houses is very different than coming from 500 houses or several thousand. So it is toxic, and the city, it appears to me, is that our city manager and our mayor and council, they feel like it's not much of a hazard. But you can get meningitis, hepatitis. Serious hepatitis is a serious situation. And there's all kinds of bloodborne pathogens that are in sewage. And so even though people work with it, it's a hazard. So I'm asking you to do something to tell council that yes, you believe that this sewage, you have proof that this sewage thing happened, and it happened, this sewage spill in September and October. That's all I'm asking you to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Does anybody else want to speak in the petitions and requests?
I do.
Sorry.
Good evening, council members. Kristen Marti, Cocoa resident, Titusville supporter. I was glad to be able to talk a little bit about the minutes a moment ago. And one of the things that I didn't mention is that the minutes are online. So my draft and the comment that I submitted was online before the meeting for anybody on the planet to find, which is another wish, and I imagine many of you join me that we wish that the records were available electronically. I did write to everyone today, so you got a couple of emails from me. One of them is right here. I'll be quoting some material from it, but I wanted to say that was not included in my comment, or partially included, is that I am recording tonight. It was in my second email. I am recording tonight, and that is a protest for the lack of video and the fact that the city, there's an ongoing declining to record these meetings. I think they're of great value to the public, and so I'm taking the time to do that. So this is a form of protest that if the city won't use the very expensive equipment that has been purchased for this express purpose, that a citizen will stand in, and I hope other citizens do likewise in the future. I also object to the characterization of the TEC made by the city manager and a council member in regard to the 315 meeting, and I would just like to state that on record, that I object to that. This characterization was disputed by multiple attendees. It was disputed by multiple attendees, and I do hope that we see a different path moving forward. My comment tonight, my topic is the aligning of TEC recommendations with the city's annual strategic planning process. And I have a question for you all, which is, where is the TEC in the city's annual strategic planning process? Where is the TEC? There was a community conversation in February. Some of you may have been there. There was a city council meeting in March. Some of you may have been there. Some of you may have even made statements at that. Where are the TEC's recommendations in the city's annual process? Where are the TEC's recommendations in the performance objectives that the city measures quarterly and grades itself on a red, yellow, green standard? Where's the TEC in that? Because I've been studying this now for over a year, and I find that the TEC is absent. It's not on you, it's just that this process right now, my petition to you all is to encourage the alignment of the TEC objectives and the insertion of those objectives into the annual process. There should have already been a meeting by now, right? We've had a council meeting already, and they did not review recommendations of the TEC in that March 7th meeting, the one where my attachment is missing. Okay, so I just really would like to bring that to your attention. What I did in my email was, I wrote the 4 objectives that I felt most succinctly matched up to items that dealt with the lagoon in particular, but the environment. I also pulled out the city's goals, right? So we've got the city's goals stated, their performance objectives, their targets for this, and then also I took related to the public interest, the broadcasting of board meetings as assigned. Let's get this assigned. The broadcasting of board meetings as assigned. Training sessions made available to the public. Let's have a training session so that the public understands what matters, what's going on with the environment, how can we protect the things that matter to us, the trees and the manatees and the lagoon and all the things that really matter to us. The suggestions that I made, that I put in here that I would like to state for the record are, I suggested that the TEC review the performance measures that were attached and to consider the following actions. Number 1, TEC add an agenda item to an upcoming meeting to review the FY 2023 performance measures and targets. They look like this. There's 55 of them this year. The TEC should be reviewing. You should all be aware of them. Are you? And I wouldn't be surprised if you're not even aware of them. So it should be an agenda item to have those discussed and have staff give a presentation. Number 2, TEC consider recommending specific suggestions to council on the FY 2023, which have already been decided but could be adjusted, and the FY 2024 performance measures and targets for which is underway somewhere in the city manager's office with staff. Number 3, the TEC can request staff to originate recommendations on performance measures to be included in the FY 2024 updating and to consider revisions in the FY 2023. So we can make changes to those. Number 4, TEC consider requesting staff to make a presentation on the city's performance measures and targets for this year, 2023, what is being planned for 2024, and that updating, and request staff to provide quarterly updates to the TEC as the targets are completed each quarter. And number 5, if I could just finish this, the TEC requests a status from staff on your January vote to make the TEC video recorded available and that has council support and which no council action has been taken. I respectfully request that you consider my comments. I'm very interested in having these processes joined so that you matter and that you're on the radar for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lordy. Any comments?
Wow.
You're on tape. Can we include Kristen's comments in our minutes at the next meeting so we can make sure to review them and discuss what we want to put forward for a future agenda item at the next meeting? I'd like us to discuss these issues, and I'd like to see them included in the minutes at the next meeting, so that this goes forward as part of our record.
And that was requested in my email. At the very bottom it said I explicitly give you permission and request that they're included in the minutes.
Wow. Since you have the email, is that possible to include her comments?
And staff has a copy.
In the minutes of the next meeting, or would it be, if we make it an agenda item to discuss
Should be both.
what she's requested, could her email be included as in our agenda package? Where would be the appropriate place to put them?
That's a better place if you want to have a specific agenda item to discuss something specifically, yes. Minutes are generally to so everybody understands, it's really just supposed to be a summary discussion to get a highlight of what happened. And that's really the guidance we get from the clerk's office. So anything more detailed than that is usually not something typical. But as an agenda item for you to discuss with specific, maybe handouts that she provided to you, you've done it in the past, of course.
Can I make a motion that we put that on a future agenda item then?
Well, let's wait until
Or you wanna
we
do
get
it
down
again?
to item,
All right. Yeah,
discussion. Item 11. We got a long way to go, but I suggest that we add that under 11.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. All right. Moving on to old business. In your packet, you've got a map and I think a paragraph.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Of a concept to use the forested wetlands that we are so fortunate to have here in our town. We have stuff that no other community has. We have these fabulous forested wetlands that could be used to hold stormwater inside the wetlands rather than funnel it to the river in ditches and through stormwater ponds. At last night's city council meeting, it was the use of staff time for Sandra Reller was approved unanimously by the council. There's going to be a meeting on Friday at 10 o'clock with member JoLynn.Nelson, Councilmember Nelson, and Sandra Reller, who is the head of our stormwater department, and a couple of members of the St. Johns River Water Management District to discuss this very thing. The Water Management District seems to be very supportive of it. I met with Mike Knight, who is the executive director of the Brevard County Environmentally Endangered Lands Program last week, along with Jim Swan, who's a local developer environmentalist, Virginia Barker, the head of Brevard County Natural Resources Department, and Vince Lamb, a well-known environmental activist. And they are excited about this concept. There were comments made by some county commissioners that they would not be in favor of using any EEL money to purchase properties that had the potential to be developed. They feel like we have enough uplands already preserved within the EEL program. There's about 24,000 acres of lands within the EEL program now, most of which is uplands. And they would not be in favor of taking anything off the tax rolls that could be developed. Well, it basically leaves wetlands, and they would be supportive of properties that are located near the Indian River. They seem to be okay with approving properties that would benefit the health of the Indian River Lagoon. Well, in my humble opinion, this project, this attempt to acquire these large wetland areas that are within our city would be monumental. It would be the biggest thing that we could possibly do to address the very poor health of the northern Indian River Lagoon. So I was hoping to get a recommendation from this committee tonight to take it to the city council. It's already been there and unanimously voted on, so hopefully we can talk about it and you guys can support it. I attended a BMAP, a presentation, a 3-hour presentation on an update to the Basin Management Action Plans last week with the Department of Environmental Protection. It was a very, very good presentation. And they made sure that Titusville was complimented on what we're already doing to help the Indian River Lagoon. They used a slide, I think it came from the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Citizens Oversight Committee presentation that was done, that shows all of the projects that have been applied for and completed by the different cities in Brevard County that have applied for Save Our Indian River Lagoon funding to complete projects. And Titusville is at the top of the list with 11 projects. The next closest was the Brevard Zoo with 10 projects. And most of them, their projects are shoreline restoration. So these would be individual oyster reef type projects that the zoo has applied for. And I think the next closest city was Cocoa, maybe with 4. So we're way out ahead of the rest of the pack when it comes to applying for and completing projects that are funded with the Save Our Indian River Lagoon funding. This acquisition of the wetlands and re-engineering the flow of water away from the Indian River Lagoon towards the wetlands would be a massive project, way bigger than building some baffle boxes and planting some tree boxes down in downtown Titusville. But it's, in my opinion, this is where the city should be looking. I mean, these smaller projects are great, but this project here would be off the charts as far as the benefits to the Indian River Lagoon. As I said, the Water Management District is in favor of it. This could really be a game changer for the northern end of the Indian River Lagoon. And I'm gonna hush now and let you guys talk. I guess, do we call cards first? Yeah, let's call the cards before we have our discussion.
Stand here, please.
Stan Johnston, I'm going to speak about what Mrs. Thompson was talking about, and because I made note about it on April the 10th. My email of April the 10th also went to you guys, and it says, please contact me about a number of items, and one of the items is a city's dams constructed without showing what dams flood, numbered AE flood zones that are not correct, and I also have, I'll give you another number. Well, I have six large cross drains under I-95 between Fox Lake Road and State Road 50. No maintenance of these ditches and floodways west of I-95 in violation of city stormwater master plan of Greater Titusville and FEMA requirements. I wrote here, Titusville is neither resilient nor sustainable on this matter. The 2019 Resilient Report deliberately omitted detailed sealed information from me on this problem. So the big issue that I'm speaking about is a poster I did not bring with me, but the city of Titusville has a stormwater management plan of Greater Titusville, which includes areas outside of the city of Titusville. And the city of Titusville is not following that stormwater master plan. It shows many areas to be purchased by the city of Titusville for large retention areas and so forth within the city. The city is obligated to follow this stormwater master plan, and there was false reports that the city of Titusville has been following it. So I'm recommending that some staff members receive get that stormwater management report. It's a booklet with a number of photos in it and so forth. Colored, it's a colored. It costs about $35, and I have a copy of it somewhere in the house. And I've had a copy of it, partial copy of it, since about 1984 maybe. So I didn't realize it, but the city of Titusville has not been following that, and it's tragedy. And I've been complaining a number of times at P&Z is that the comprehensive plan is extremely flawed because the city is not following the stormwater management plan. The city has, it's a big deal. It's millions and millions of dollars. The city has not used it. They could have spent towards acquisition of these properties that Mrs. Thompson is talking about. So I would suggest that your staff here get a copy of that, and you got it too. That's all. Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Johnson, who authored this report or plan?
It's
You said the city?
yeah, Black Crow and Isness, done in 1966.
For the city?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's supposed to also be sent to Brevard County. I believe it has been sent to it, but there's people who deny that Brevard County has received it. I found, but when I say it's sent to Brevard County, is that Brevard County was expected to also adopt this and to maintain those ditches outside of the city limits, and they haven't done it. It's a big deal. And the thing is we've got all these FEMA maps that are rely on ditches being maintained. They're not. You got FEMA zones that have no calculations, and I've talked to an engineer at FEMA, he says it should never happen. FEMA zones, number of FEMA zones without calculations, it's ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That stormwater master plan, is that, I know that it's got some large pages and colored maps and stuff like that, but is that something that could be digitally included in our agenda packet for next meeting?
We would have to ask our Public Works Department about that, and if it's available, we can certainly make it available to TEC and forward that to you.
That would be wonderful. I would love to see it.
I'm not familiar with it, so I'll have to find out, but any record request that this commission's asking for, if it's available, we'll make it available.
Fill out a card. If you speak, you're gonna have to, if you speak at the microphone, you'll have to fill out a speaker card.
Oh, speaker card.
You can go ahead and speak and then fill out a card. You don't have to fill out a
Okay,
card.
a retroactive card, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me back again. It's been a little bit too long since I've been to one of these meetings, but number one, I just want to thank all of you for serving on this committee. It's an extremely important function for our community. I get the sense that not everybody necessarily agrees with that, but I serve as a citizen of this community. I realize how essential your services are. So thank you very, very much. Big professional hug to all of you. But I'm also involved. The first time I came up, I was involved in dealing with some of the stormwater issues as a new resident. I live at Heritage Drive, over just a little bit west of Park Avenue. And I think I'd be very interested in, as a citizen, being able to have a copy of what we have in map form of our stormwater features. I went online to see what was available. We do not have a complete accounting for those features, which would include the creeks, the ditches, the impoundment, the ponds. That would be a very important access availability for anybody who's interested in dealing with these kinds of things. So if it's in the report, I would love to be able to see something like that. And I'd also maybe recommend it to the city itself that those things be included with all the other maps that we have. We do have a lot of maps, a lot of GIS gallery maps, but the stormwater features are very important for this area. And it'd be nice to know where they all are. Some of them are under roads and so forth and so on. But because I'm very interested in it. By the way, I brought two interns with me tonight that are from outside this area. They're marine conservation interns. They're very impressive individuals. And I think listening to you and listening to what's going on in our community is a very big educational thing for them to see the reality of it. And I'm going to have a nice discussion later on afterwards to see how it goes. So thank you. So my recommendation would be, please, the stormwater features themselves are indeed extremely important, including those forested and non-forested wetlands that we have, plus all the excavated ditches, the ponds, the canals. So we know where those things are. We can be able to point them out, whether they be formal or informal. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Don't forget to fill out your card, Mr. Greenberg.
Completely boring.
All right, are there any other cards?
Yes.
Yes, right up here.
Mary Spar.
When she's coming up, you would have thought that those maps would be available. I mean, for Florida, these ditches and water features are a big, big deal. They're not.
They are.
No, I mean, what maps are available?
Maybe it's something to do with the ADA requirement. I'm not sure, but I think that's the reason that we don't get the full city council agenda packets, online. You have to call up and request it. So maybe you have to call up and request the maps too. but it could have something to do with that. You can't put stuff on the website that's not ADA compliant.
ADA, American Disabilities Act.
Yep.
Many jurisdictions are doing that.
It has to be accessible.
They managed to do it in Cocoa,
Mhm.
in the county, I don't
And-
see why Titusville.
It took the county a long, long time to convert over to, and there's still, you can't get the county commission agenda online like you used to be.
Yes, you
able
can.
to. It's all
You
because
can
of,
get the agenda.
Uh-huh.
I mean, not the agenda packet.
Oh, you can get all the
1100-page
attachments online.
agenda packet is not available online like it once was.
Oh, I know what you're saying. The compile view, that's possible. You can get all the attachments by going into the agenda items.
Yeah.
But I do remember there used to be like a couple hundred, the couple 100-page version. Okay.
All right, member Yao, did you want to speak before Mary, or do you want Mary to go first? Your light's on. Okay, hi Mary.
I'm Mary Sarah.Stoeckel. I actually came here to hear this item, forested wetlands. I'm just really excited about it. And you were talking about the Indian River Lagoon and possibly using for stormwater, which is great. I'd like to point out that in addition to that, preservation of these forested wetlands would allow us to preserve the functions of these wetlands themselves and also the functions of the trees. And there are just so many beautiful trees within these forested wetlands. I've actually gone through some projects and looked at the enumeration of the different trees. It's just incredible. And the whole swath of trees, which I believe someone described at the City Council meeting, is going from State Road 46 down to south of State Road 50. I do have a question for you, and that's why I filled out a card. I know that a lot of these forested wetlands are in the Indian River Lagoon watershed. But I was wondering, I know that Lower Lee had discussions with, the EO program and supporters of that. And also, there's going to be a discussion with the water management district people. And some of that may have already taken place. What about those portions of the swath from State Road 46 down through south to, of 50? What about that portion which may be in the St. Johns River watershed? I do happen to know that even though the district has bought quite a bit of, conservation land, there's still problems in the St. Johns with the nutrients, in particular the phosphorus, because one reason being that the biosolids spread on the agricultural land. So we have problems with the St. Johns as well, and I was wondering if the proposal would include, if a wetland happened to be in the St. John's watershed, or if it would just only include those that would be in the Indian River Lagoon watershed. And I know there's a map that delineates where the dividing line goes, but I don't happen to have it. So that's my question. If anybody has an answer, it'd be great. Thanks.
I can't really answer that question. The intent is to purchase the wetlands, to use them for storage of stormwater to keep it from going into the Indian River Lagoon. Mr. Johnson commented that there are 5 culverts between Fox Lake Road and State Road 50 that go under I-95 that would be, they would drain a portion of these wetlands back to the west under I-95 and over into the St. Johns River floodplain. So, I'm not sure how to answer your question. I assume that if those culverts were reopened, then some of the water would go over into the marshes west of I-95. Right now, if Mr. Johnson is correct that those culverts are plugged, the water's not going over into the St. Johns River floodplain. I-95, pretty much cuts everything off between the Indian River side and the St. Johns River side. So I'm not sure how to answer your question, Mary. Does anybody else?
I mean, looking at the map that you presented here, every single one of your pinpointed subject areas go into, are on that east side of 95, and so likely would not go into the St. John's.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's just logic.
Yeah.
There's not one of them that you have west of it.
Just the St. John's map here.
Right.
Yeah. The west.
Yeah, I know.
South.
But they're all this side.
Right.
None of the targeted. Yeah, or they pinpointed.
Although in a major event, would those overflow and go west under the culverts under 95?
It's outside.
Yeah, if the culverts were open. And there's a lot of marsh in between Titusville and the actual St. Johns River that, could effectively absorb a lot of the nutrients, and help clean the water as it's moving west. I personally, it's all about the fresh water. It's about stopping the fresh water from poisoning the northern Indian River Lagoon. And I'm not a scientist, but in my opinion, it would be better to send the fresh water west towards the freshwater St. Johns River system rather than continue to let it go into the Indian River Lagoon. And they are doing some big diversion projects down in the south end of the county. When I questioned why they had not targeted any projects for the northern Indian River Lagoon, I was told because it's easier to do them down in the south part of the county. They've got areas that are already west of 95. It's just easier to do it down there. They're not dealing with the odd topography that we have up here in Titusville. It's flat down there. They don't have these beautiful sand dune systems down in the south part of the county that we are blessed with here in Titusville. So that was their answer. It's easier to do it down there. So that's when, we got to make a lot of noise because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so I think, Member Nelson contacting the St. Johns River Water Management District, and she called the assistant director, Mary Ellen Winkler, on the phone. Well, actually, she's the director of St. John's, of our part, our water management district. She called her on the phone, and they are, I can assure you, St. Johns River Water Management District is very interested in this concept. At the BMAP presentation, it was pointed out that the lagoon is getting better down in the south end, down around Melbourne. The water's super clear. They're starting to see some seagrass, closer to the inlet. They're definitely seeing improvements in the lagoon in the southern part that are not taking place up here on the north end. We still have way too much drift algae and caulerpa up here instead of the true seagrasses that they're starting to see growing down further to the south. It's because we have too many nutrients still up here, and we have a 1.5-year residency time, and basically the water is stagnant up here. There's too many causeways separating us from Sebastian Inlet. There's a lot of factors, and it's just, that's the hand we were dealt. We are up here on the northern end of the lagoon. There's very little circulation. Titusville has to work a little bit harder than the communities to the south. There's also, they can pool their resources down there. It's wall-to-wall cities down there, and municipalities, we're up here by ourselves, so we do have to work a little bit harder up here. And even though we are ahead of our projections for the BMAP reductions, it's obviously not enough, or the river would be getting better. So we just have to work harder up here. Remember, yeah, you had your light on first.
And I had a card too, as a public comment.
Oh, okay. Let's finish the cards, go ahead.
Kristen Lortie, Cocoa resident. I'm very supportive of preserving our wetlands, so I think this is a great discussion. It sounds like a great project. I'm not well versed on it at all. I'm learning about it, but I'm very supportive of that. At the beginning of your introduction, you had talked about the reference to the sorrel, that page from the sorrel, and I just wanted to mention that there is one that had 24 projects, and that's Brevard County. What happened was, after Mayor Diesel brought this up at a city council meeting, actually requested that presentation. So we have 24 from Brevard County. To Titusville credit was 11 for Titusville, the zoo was 10, Cocoa Beach 6, the Marine Resource Council 5, Melbourne 4, Cocoa 3, and then we had 9 entities that only had 2 or 1. So, you know, definitely a lot of work here with Titusville. As a resident, it would really help me to understand the give and take of it, right? Because we're doing great in some ways, and we're doing these projects and that are helping. And then we also have, you know, Mr. Johnson, we have concerns, we still have ongoing concerns. So as a resident, you kind of get lost, you know, trying to understand what is the true state of where we're at, you know, right now. And so somehow, if the city finds a way to balance that, so that we don't feel like, oh, I'm getting the city spin, you know, or I'm getting, you know, the concerned resident, you know, so that the narratives come together. That would be very helpful as a resident. And bringing us back to the strategic plan, I would mention, as far as if you wanted to, if you make, as you make recommendations, you could perhaps consider referencing what we do have right now under performance measures. And the one that appears to have some relevance to the wetlands, if it's gonna reduce nutrient loads, is that correct? That would be a target of it. So under PW 1.1, meet projected nutrient load reductions to the Indian River Lagoon through debris removal. The target is 1,000 pounds of nitrogen, 500 pounds of total phosphorus. I think that we might all agree those are small. Those targets should be updated, but it could help to, you know, add to your recommendation to be referencing the existing strategic plan and a goal that is observably within that. And then if you had something that you wanted to add to that, that could go into your recommendations of what each of your projects could do. And I did have someone alert me to the Titusville Charter and the TEC's authority within that charter, and I really recommend that's a good read, because there are wide latitude to determine projects and make recommendations. I think that's a good read. If I had more time, I would just, you know, I think that all citizens should really know that you guys have the opportunity to really help our city, and it's stated right there in the Titusville Charter. So I'd like to state that on record. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more cards, Lori?
I don't know, ma'am.
Thank you. Member Young? There's 3 lights down, one down there, does anybody else want to talk? Okay. One like that, and then
one of the things that wasn't mentioned as a benefit of removing the excess or poisonous amounts of fresh water from the lagoon is that we stand a chance to take this water recovery and actually use it for wellfield replenishment. Okay, we get the majority of our water, as far as I know, used to come from the surficial aquifer, right? And we had to go outside of our surficial aquifer after we built Astronaut High School, because we started souring some wells off of Wellfield 2, and then we built Wellfield 4, and we're paying Miami Corporation for the luxury of their water. Whereas we could be replenishing our own instead of squandering it into the Indian River Lagoon. We can capture that and make better use of it. I know up north we're actually injecting it into the surficial. We're taking surface water and injecting it into the surficial aquifer to compensate for our draw in the Florida aquifer. It was a real cascade effect. But the fact is that if we can take the stormwater that we already have, and we already know that it's causing a salinity problem in the lagoon. We know clams need 20 parts per thousand. We're getting 14, 15 in the summertime because of our rains. So we're literally not going to see the recovery of seagrass and everything else until we fix, I think, the stormwater problem. And so putting that back into our superficial aquifer for potable water usage in the future is a huge win for any city that wants to grow.
I agree with what Member Majek says there, especially since we are trying to grow the city at a crazy rate. Not all of us are trying to grow it at that crazy rate, but the city council seems to want to grow it, so recovery of that water is an important consideration. But what is it that you want from us today? Because I think everybody here agrees with these things.
I would hope that we would be in agreement that we support the city working on this concept. That's all I'm asking for. But I love the discussion.
Anybody else? I have something else.
You can go for it.
About the discussion, in your discussion, you mentioned the Royal Oak Properties, the abandoned golf course. Isn't there a developer coming in and planning on, you're talking about the areas around where they're planning on buying, or competing with them for the purchase of it?
No, actually, use of the existing ponds that are on that property that I believe might be classified as wetlands now. They've been there so long. They have beautiful wetland vegetation around them. I would hope, and maybe Brad can answer this, but I haven't seen any kind of site plan or anything for that developer, but I would hope that the ponds would survive and be used as stormwater amenities and recreational amenities.
We actually met yesterday with an engineer on behalf of the property owner with a concept for redeveloping that golf course. I think only some of those existing ponds were to continue to be in existence based on the concept they gave us. It doesn't necessarily mean that's how they're going to actually design it and submit, if we submit anything to us.
It would be a real shame to lose those ponds because they are really pretty, but they could be very useful as far as, you know, capturing and holding stormwater. So hopefully you guys, you know, encourage them to keep as many of the ponds as they possibly can. Member Yap?
Yeah, several questions about this. Who owns these properties now? A bunch of people, or are they private?
They're private.
Where does the, who wrote this paragraph? Did you write it? Who designated these as being unsuitable for building? Is that just a viewpoint, or is that somewhere on paper?
It's my opinion because they're wetlands. They're in Florida. Nothing is safe, Maria. There's nothing that's safe. There is nothing that's unbuildable. You can mitigate. You can write a check. You can fill in the most beautiful, pristine wetlands that you want to. Depends on how much money you want to spend. But
Right. I understand that. I just wondered. And where would this money come from to purchase these lands?
Potentially from the environmentally endangered lands referendum. The St. Johns River Water Management District is interested. They have funding. There's also money that's available from both of the Biden administration's recent, like the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Both of those bills have large amounts of money that's available for coastal resiliency type projects, of which this would qualify. So I don't think that we have any issue with the money. And the concept of once we buy the first wetland, and we can, if we can actually establish a mitigation bank here in Titusville, which I think is fair. I mean, because right now, when we mitigate, we lose wetlands that are in Titusville, and the mitigation occurs way up in the northwest corner of Brevard County, or even into Volusia County, or eastern Orange County, or down by State Road 520. There's no mitigation bank here. So how can we accomplish no net loss of wetlands, which it says in our comp plan, if we're mitigating out of, not only out of Brevard County, but in some cases, we're mitigating out of Brevard County. We're not even mitigating within the county. You know, my opinion is that if we can establish these forested wetlands as a mitigation bank, once we acquire one, we could start selling credits in it and then use that money to buy more. If we do this right, the city could actually make money off of it, maybe.
I had one other question. Let's just suppose money was made available and all parties were agreeable and forested wetlands number 3 became one of these forested wetlands. What needs to be done to it? I mean, it says it's a forested wetland now. I mean, what do you have to do it to make it behave the way we want it to behave? Does it need to be modified in some way?
Yes, I think it would take an engineer, you know, I'm not that smart, but that's why the Water Management District is getting involved. I'm sure that there's gonna be an engineer that's gonna be at that meeting on Friday, but and Michael may be able to answer your question better. My vision is that we could even, in some of the poor, I mean, like wetlands number 3, that's the Singleton Avenue wetlands.
Yeah, I just sort of picked that at random.
Right, okay. Yeah, so forested wetlands number 3, it's gone through a transition. It used to be totally covered with these beautiful red maples.
Yeah.
And every fall, the leaves would turn red, and it was absolutely spectacular. When you drive down Singleton Avenue now and you look west, it's a ghost forest now. The trees are all dead. The maples have died. It's not real attractive right now. But in some of the poorer areas of these wetlands, not where the forests are, but in some of the open plain, grassy type habitats, we could actually dig lakes. And I think we would have to, because the wetlands themselves, I'm not sure that they can handle all the stormwater that's coming from Titusville. So we may have to dig some very large ponds, like they're doing down on the north side of the Everglades. The STAs down there, they're digging up ponds that are hundreds and thousands of acres, but it's for storage of stormwater, in their case, storage of the water that's coming down the Kissimmee River and through Lake Okeechobee and into these created wetlands to cleanse the water before they can release it into the Everglades, because the Everglades it does not have the amount of fresh water that it historically needed. We've killed Florida Bay, you know, due to lack of fresh water. It's no longer a healthy estuary type habitat because of lack of fresh water. So I think that there would be a lot of engineering involved. It could be a 20 or 30 year project. We're gonna have to figure out how to get the water to flow west rather than east into the Indian River. So there would be a lot of engineering that could be involved. We would definitely want to preserve the actual forested areas, so we could have them for recreation and keep the trees, because trees are very effective at picking up stormwater. And I hope I've answered your question.
I think you started answering my last one, and that's recreational potential, like a boardwalk running down the middle of it or something like that. Has that been mentioned as part of this?
Absolutely. In order to use the EO funding on them, there would have to be a recreational component. Now, and what?
Let me just throw this in, because the chain of lakes, unfortunately, is too pretty. It's just too pretty. I take my students out there, and I have to tell them that it's a stormwater retention thing, because they think it was built as a park. And, okay.
No, we would have a recreational amenity that no other city in the county and very few cities in the whole entire state would have. I mean, if you put boardwalks and trails through the forested wetlands part and boardwalks over the really wet parts, the bird life that it would attract would be out of this world, you know. And we are already a destination for people that want to come here and look at birds and wildlife. We would just be, this would ensure that what we have now would be here for our kids and our grandkids and the health of the lagoon. Everybody wins. And it could possibly reduce the number of arguments that we get into every time a developer wants to fill in one of these little tiny embedded wetlands that still remain. When they do that, instead of the mitigation taking place outside of Titusville, we would be preserving our wetlands as a mitigation bank so that we could always have them, and it would make it easier for the developers too. They're kind of excited about this also, and it would ensure that we would have a tremendous recreational amenity. It could help the flooding that's occurring in the Baker subdivision that Mr. Johnston talks about all the time. I've seen the flooding there. It's horrible. And you know, it would be easy to divert what's happening in that neighborhood because there's a huge hundreds of acres of wetlands right next to it. So we could solve the flooding problem that we have in some of our older neighborhoods that were actually built on top of wetlands and continue to flood periodically.
Thank you. While you were talking about this, you mentioned if we got one parcel sold, we could use that as a gateway to buy more parcels. So when I was being placed here as not an alternate member, but a permanent member, in front of the council that week, one of the things that came up was the city was purchasing some parcels in my neighborhood that are swampy. And their purpose, they were going to purchase two of them, one on February 23rd and one like 2 or 3 weeks later. They were coming up for auction with the idea of having them as storage areas for water. So the precedence is already set, right? And I can tell you where those parcels are. They're in a subdivision called Sun Valley, and the dates were February 23rd to purchase one parcel, and then 2 weeks later for the next parcel. So the precedent's already set. So
yeah,
we can reference that.
Okay.
When we talk about it.
Thank you. Member Perez?
Yeah, would it be beneficial to keep these large culverts that run under 95 and surrounding ditches open in order to try to get that flow going west, and what's preventing that from actually happening?
You mean what's I personally don't know whether the culverts are blocked or not. I don't know. I don't even know where they are. I'm just going on hearsay. So I don't know what would be preventing them from being maintained. I guess maybe the budget. It's not a high priority. I don't know. I don't know why they're not being maintained, if in fact they're not being maintained.
Okay, well, I'm going by what's been said in the past. I think Stan mentioned this in the past through APAS. But considering we're talking about the health of the lagoon and reducing potential flooding in neighborhoods, you would think that this would be a priority for, I think it's the county that would be responsible for doing that work, but
You mean maintaining the culverts under 95?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't answer that question. We'd have to. That'd be a question for the public works.
Kevin Cook.
Hmm?
Maybe Kevin Cook.
Yeah, Kevin Cook might be able to answer that question. You can send him an email. Send him an email and ask, you know, what's going on with the 5 culverts? What's going on with the culverts under I-95? And he can answer that question. I can't. Anybody else? So, you guys okay with supporting the city council in their unanimous decision that they made last night to try to move this project forward?
Yes.
Guess we need a motion.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. Do we need a motion to recommend this plan to city council? Is that?
Or say we support it.
Say we support it.
They're already all over it.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I heard last night too. So it seemed-
So I was at that meeting last night. What I heard was council approved advisability, giving member JoLynn.Nelson permission to utilize more than 2 hours of staff's time. Specifically, she requested time with Sandra, Deputy Director of Public Works, in a meeting with St. John's to have discussions about this. That's what the advisability was. So it wasn't to any support or to create any kind of plan, it was to have a discussion.
Thank you for that clarification.
So where do we want to go with this? I mean, to me, it seems like an excellent plan that we, envision something to step forward for. It's an outside the box approach. It's a win-win-win on 3 different fronts: stormwater, lagoon, as well as boiling water. So I'd like to see the TEC recommend this as a future path, future plan for managing our stormwater, and make that recommendation to add some strength and clout to what Member Nelson is going to be talking about on Friday with St. John's.
Okay.
So I would make a.
I second.
Is there any further discussion? We've already discussed quite a bit. Member Perez, you got any light on it? We're good? Okay. I'd like to get out of here at 7:30, so.
Ma'am, if I may ask, just to clarify what the motion was. This is just a motion stating your support for what JoLynn.Nelson asked for and got approval for yesterday. Is that
We
correct?
might want to say that we did a cursory review, because this is the kind of thing that in the old days, the city would consider, and then they would put together some information about it, and then they would give it to us to look at. So we can just say, look, we've had a cursory review, and we think this is a great way for the city to go, that we recommend, based on what we've seen so far. This is a big deal, and there might be a lot of details that they might want us to look at later, for whatever reason. So, yeah, just so we took a brief look at it, I think it's a great idea, and they should move forward with it.
Okay. So we need a simple motion that Lori can follow.
I thought it was too, but.
Okay, well, then restate it then.
You didn't start with the word motion.
Motion.
To get everybody in motion.
Including this motion. How shall we word this?
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
It sounds like you want to provide this information to her.
Yes, and to the city.
And to the city, so we can provide this to the city manager for him to distribute, if that is your direction. And you can make a motion to that effect. So it's really you're providing information to her in anticipation for that meeting she's gonna have.
Okay.
That's one recommendation, but you can make any other motion you desire.
What do you guys think?
This, we can invite meeting just this week.
This is.
I'm sorry, there's several members talking at one time, I'm not following.
You said that we provide her with this. What did you mean by this? Exactly?
What you have in the agenda packet, you have the memo, Forest and Wetlands, that was provided by Ms. Laura Lee Thompson, and the image that's attached to the agenda.
Okay. Does that sound good to everybody? So.
Yep.
So we'll make a motion that we submit this to the city manager for future direction.
That's good.
And I'll second it.
This plan, this
These
forested
paragraphs.
wetland plan that we just.
So basically, we support the plan, and here it is for the city manager. I know they've got copies, because I've given it out to the city council, but.
This will be with the recommendation.
This will be with the recommendation that we are supportive and would like to remain informed, and involved in the process also as it moves forward.
I may say it so too, so basically what I'm hearing is a motion to just get this to the city manager, obviously, and ask him to distribute it to city council members in anticipation of Friday's meeting.
Yeah.
It's not to bring it to city council
Right.
at a meeting for them, okay.
Yeah, but we want to be involved in the process.
And to add to that, just to remind you, council's meeting on the 14th, one of the agenda items, you had recommended several changes to the code about environmental policies. The council directed staff to address your recommendations to council to consider amendments to the city's regulations as part of the comprehensive plan amendment process. So we had received direction from city council last year to do a comprehensive plan amendment related to environmental policies. So they had asked us to roll some of those recommendations we previously gave them into that process. I think what you're discussing tonight could certainly be related to that process as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion by member Myjack and seconded by member Fliss that we provide the map in the paragraph to the city manager to be distributed to the city council prior to the meeting on Friday, and that we would like to remain involved in the process as this moves forward. Is it okay with that, Lori? Okay, all right, I guess we need a roll call vote on this.
Member Yount,
Yes.
Member Delgado,
Yes.
Member Fliss,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Myjack,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Tucker, Chairwoman Thompson.
Yes, all right, thank you very much, guys. Moving on, new business?
Chairperson?
Yes, ma'am.
Thompson, before we move on, I actually have to leave the meeting a bit early today. Before I left, I had a few announcements, so if you don't mind.
You have the floor.
I regretfully must inform you all that this will be my last TDC meeting. I will be leaving the city on May 3rd. I hope, however, that this is not going to be the last time that I see you, because we have a few events planned in the near future. And so I'm going to pass these out to you and then talk about them.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You will be missed. I'm sorry to hear this.
I have a few more. I don't think I made enough, so.
Okay, so what I just handed to you is a open house that we are planning on Monday, April 24th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And this is going to be an opportunity for members of the public to talk directly with staff, one-on-one conversations regarding issues related to resiliency. Really one of the main focuses here, kind of very similar to a lot of the conversation we're having today, is about floodplains and making sure that our city continues to be resilient in the issue of shocks and stressors that we face. So this is an opportunity to talk to staff, to get a better understanding of our daily operations and how we incorporate resiliency into our daily operations, and just kind of have those conversations where you can get your questions answered. There won't be any presentation, there won't be any public comment, it'll just be kind of tables and booths where you can go up and get information. We'll also have some partner agencies there at the open house. The East Central Florida Regional Planning Council will be there, IFAS will be there, the FDP Clean Boating Program and the Aquatic Preserve will also be there, so they'll also have really good information for you all. So I really hope that you guys can spread this word with your network and your neighbors, so we can get people who don't normally participate with us in the city to kind of get them more involved in understanding of what's going on here and how we make decisions related to resiliency. So it'd be really great if you can attend yourself and spread the word to your neighbors. So that's the first event, and then the following evening and the time frame, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. is to kind of try to capture a larger audience, because some people get out of work earlier. You know, if you're a teacher, you might be leaving at 3:30, and then all the way up to 7 p.m. for those who leave work later. So there's no time frame that you have to be there. I would anticipate it would take 30 minutes to an hour to talk to everyone at the event. So you don't have to be there at any certain time. There's not going to be any presentations or anything like that. So please help me spread the word. I would really like some good attendance at this event, and I have more flyers if anyone would like them afterwards. So that's the first event, and then the second event is the following evening at the City Council meeting. I will be providing an update on the City Sustainability Action Plan. and this will be the final update on the action plan, and it'll be up for adoption at 6:30 p.m. So it'd be really great to have people there in support of the Sustainability Action Plan, because there's a lot of really good items on a variety of topics to help improve the sustainability of Titusville. And I'm really excited and hope that council will adopt the plan and get started working on that. So there will be a presentation on April 25th. And then one last thing, it hasn't been announced yet, but since it will happen before the next TEC meeting, we will also be holding a community training on resiliency. So that will be on Monday, May 3rd, and I will be emailing that to all of you. It's going to be a lunch and learn webinar, and we're going to be partnering again with the Central Florida Regional Planning Council and IFAS to provide residents here in Titusville with training on, one, how to have conversations about resiliency, so giving people the tools and the language that they need to be able to have those conversations, and then how to effectively communicate. And then the second portion of it will most likely be what are things that we can do every day that improves our personal resiliency, like Florida-friendly landscaping, incorporating rain gardens into our landscaping, you know, and how our own personal stormwater that we contribute into the system, how we can better manage that and reduce our personal impacts. So that's going to be the community training. It's going to be a lunch and learn on May 3rd. I don't have much information on that right now, but I'm just giving you a heads up because I will definitely be following up and sending you all emails to attend that webinar. So we still have a lot of really fun, exciting things going on before I leave. But unfortunately, this will be my last TEC meeting. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I really mean that, working with you all, and I really appreciate my time here. Thank you.
Well, first I'd like to, respond to that, and obviously, we wish you weren't leaving, but we understand, I wanted to ask you, is there a Facebook or, that we can link to our Facebook?
Yeah, so there is an event, the City of Titusville has an event on Facebook.
Okay, so it's on there.
You can share it on Facebook, respond that you're interested or going. That'd be really awesome.
I just want to thank you. It has been a pleasure working with you too. You are a delightful, very smart young lady, and we really, really appreciate you. And we hate to see you go, but we're really proud of you, and we hope that your position here on your resume helps you move, fly like a bird. We're really proud of you, and we wish you much, much success, and we're sad to see you go. But we're happy to see you advancing in your career, and we don't want to hold you back. We really, really appreciate you. I know that we've been difficult to work with sometimes, but it's because we care and we get frustrated, and you've been very nice about it. So, thank you. Anyone else? Northwest?
Yeah, you're so calm, and you're so kind, and you're so helpful. Thank you.
All right, seeing we have no new business, petitions and requests from the public, does anybody want to talk that didn't talk before, that wants to talk about something different than they talked about before?
I have something that's important, and it
Petitions and requests,
okay.
come on up.
Thank you, Kristen from Cocoa. Lovely meeting. I'm very glad to be here. I wanted to make a recommendation based on what you're about to talk about next, which is you brought up the idea of taking the items that I suggested and turning that into agenda items. So I took a look at it during the meeting so that I could float something by you to see if it made sense to you. So the first thing is that one, Item number 5, I said request a status from staff on their January vote, on your January vote to make the TEC recorded available. That's something that could be checked in with now and find out, do you need to do another vote? You know, because that one, the audio was lost on that, or is it lost in translation? Like, just what's the status and then what needs to happen next. So that's something that could possibly happen with a quick chat with staff. And then items 3 and 4. Item 3 is TEC can request staff to originate recommendations on performance measures and to consider revisions going into for the next year and then possibly revisions to this year. If you guys voted on that tonight to say that we like that idea, then they would come more prepared. I'm not sure exactly how it all works, but you know, then there'd be a month of preparation time that staff would have if that was a worthwhile proposal. And then the TEC consider requesting staff to make a presentation on the city's performance measures and targets. That's another thing that staff could be working on, and then you'd have a more productive meeting. So if those 2 items occurred, and then your discussion about what your recommendations are, it seems like that might make for a nice meeting, because then you would lastly, TEC, have a discussion, consider recommending specific suggestions to council. And in the meantime, you could all get versed on the attachments. And I've already made a attachment that has all the things that were in my email into one attachment, and I'm happy to send that to City, because that can be used as the basis for the discussion. But I just thought I would propose that in case that made sense for the meeting, and I think it would be a really good discussion. And then, is there any questions on that? Okay. Lastly, I would like to read just a couple of things from your charter that I think would be, or helpful to me to see. I didn't know these. And just a couple of the sentences here. Under the goals and objectives of your commission, it says the Titusville Environmental Water Resources Commission shall study general environmental conditions in and surrounding the city of Titusville and make specific recommendations to the city council regarding the environmental effects of existing conditions, future and public and private development projects, subjects of particular environmental water resource concern, and issues regarding environmental sustainability in order to improve information available to the city council in their decision-making role. And the first part of the next paragraph says, the commission may study any subject of environmental water resources interest or concern and report its findings and recommendations to the city council, city staff, Titusville Planning and Zoning Commission, or any other duly authorized city committee. So I just feel really encouraged by that you guys have so much latitude to study things. And so I leave with that, and because sometimes with boards like these, the powers can be constricted, right? Where you have to only act on things that have come before you, and there can be a lot of protocol, but this really appears to give you a lot of authority. And given some of the back and forth after the last meeting, I'm encouraged to read that and to be able to share that out loud with you. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Ms. Lordy. And in fact, I have a homework assignment for the group, and it is what you just said. It is
Good. Have everybody read this.
Language for the TEC, for everybody to take home and ponder, so that we will be ready to discuss it at the next meeting. Does anyone else need to speak? Anybody else want to speak? All right, so we have no new business. We've been through petitions and requests. So we're on to reports, and it says I get to go first. So I want to tell you where we are on the urban tree canopy assessment. Our 6 recommendations that accidentally got omitted, during the city council meeting, the March 14th city council meeting. And I do believe that it was a mistake, I really do. And Brad and I have talked, and I've met with the mayor, I met with Member Cole this afternoon. Everybody wants to just forget about what happened and move forward. It's not going to do any good trying to rehash it and talk about what happened and everything. It happened, and unfortunately it got missed at the city council. It was not intentional in any way, shape, or form. And my suggestion for how to move forward is, and the 6 recommendations, well, first of all, you guys tasked me with going through the meeting notes, and we had a long discussion, you know, about what exactly you wanted me to say to the city council if I carried these forward, and those are on my, what I came up with after listening to the tape a couple of times and trying to figure out, and my notes that I took at this meeting, this is what I came up with for the 6 recommendations. If I were going to go to the city council and present them, this is what I would say. My recommendation is that we take these 6, you know, priorities that you guys spend a lot of time identifying, and instead of trying to attach them to the Planet Geo's urban forestry assessment, my opinion is that the more appropriate place for these is actually in the tree canopy plan, which City Council did approve at the same meeting, and I think there was a lot of confusion. I mean, it had to be explained to me multiple times that no, there's an assessment and then there's an implementation plan. I believe that these 6 priority recommendations that you guys worked so hard on actually belong in the implementation plan. And so I wanted to throw that out on the table and see how you guys feel about that. Thank you.
Man, if I may add to your conversation, to what you just said, in addition to that, we talked about those recommendations for the planet, about the Planet Geo's canopy assessment be carried over to the TEC's concept urban forestry plan, but included in also that staff's, the advisability that council directed staff to do about analyzing the needs and service requirements and the resources that might be necessary of the recommendations from that concept plan, but in addition to that, also include those 6 recommendations on Planet Geo's assessment. And we had no issue with that. We can certainly do that. So when we come back, we'll include everything.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, so right now the city staff is analyzing the plan, and they'll come back to the city council with their, you know, recommendations. But the fact that these 6 recommendations that you guys worked so hard on could actually be included in that plan, I think is good. These are action items. They're not part of an assessment. These are action items that should be in the implementation plan. And so how do you guys feel about that?
Maybe we need to make a motion that they get included in the plan.
That would be nice.
Okay, let's make a motion that they get included in the plan.
Second.
All right. Is there any, the motion is made by member Fliss and seconded by member Myjack that the 6 recommendations be incorporated into the tree canopy implementation plan. Is there any further discussion?
I've asked this before, but are we allowed to move something like that without having it be part of the agenda? Or do we have to do it next week when it's on the agenda, or is that okay? Just asking.
I have to concur with that, because right now you do not have your concept plan on your agenda to amend. So I thought what you were going to do was concur with the statements that Chairman and I made about that you agree with our agreement here that we'll include the 6 recommendations you had for this assessment in our staff's analysis. We'll include it in our analysis to City Council of the concept plan, and we'll also include analysis of those 6 recommendations. But that's different from what I'm hearing about a motion of amending a plan that's currently not on your agenda. So yes, I agree with what's the question of Mr. Johnson.
Do you want to withdraw your motion and go along with what Mr. Parrish has suggested, or?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Member Myjack, are you okay with that? Yeah, okay, all right, so the motion has been withdrawn and the second has been withdrawn. So you guys okay with what Mr. Parrish has suggested? You concur?
Yes.
Everyone concur? Thank you very much. Okay. So, I guess I'll hand out my homework assignment too. So, here's your powers and duties of the TEC.
Too bad, bro.
And there's one for Lori. I have also included a very ancient, actually, the Titusville Environmental Commission Plan of Action that was created in 1997 and then revised in 1999. Some of you may have received it in an email from Mr. Klein. Funny, I had already printed the copies to bring them to the meeting when Mr. Klein included them in his email. So here are these, and you'll see that a lot of them, coincide with the powers and duties that are written into the LDRs or the city charter or wherever this came from. And one of them is to request the St. Johns River Water Management to permit using preservation and mitigation areas for grasslands, ponds, BMPs, etc. to slow percolation of water. So there's quite a bit of stuff in here about water quality and stuff like that. So I thought you guys would find these interesting. So there you go. There's some extra copies here if any of the audience wants some. I'll keep one for me. So if any of you guys from the audience want some of these, they're here. And does everybody have them? Need one? Okay.
I'll do
All right, and that concludes my report. Just want to go down the line, start with member Yap.
I have no report.
I also attended the PMAP meeting, and I thought that, I still think the PMAP process itself is flawed. I think the idea of trying to only measure what you're collecting and not the overall is the wrong approach, but this is what we're doing, so.
I'm sorry, in my report, I wanted to welcome my friends from Arosha. They have been lifesavers this year for the horseshoe crab monitoring because obviously I cannot hobble around on the shoreline in a walking boot and a wheelchair. And they have been outstanding at ensuring that anytime I pick up the phone and call them or send them a text that says, oh, the wind looks right, they stop what they're doing and run down to the causeway and check for horseshoe crabs. And it has been a pleasure working with you guys. You're awesome. We're so glad to welcome you to our city. Next.
Are we on number 11? Are we on number 11?
Not yet, we're on reports. Do you have a report? No. Member Delgado, Member Perez, Member Tucker, you have a report? Okay. Now we're on 11.
Okay.
Wait a minute, we gotta extend the meeting. Sorry, I was trying to get us out of here at 7:30. Can I hear a motion to extend the meeting for 10 minutes?
Motion to extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Everybody okay with that? 10 minutes.
Okay, number 11 is discussion of future agenda items. One of the things last month that I had asked for was whether we could get, if staff could provide SOPs of what to do in case there are sewage spills.
They sent that.
Pardon me?
They sent that. You didn't get the email?
No, I didn't.
Okay, they did.
We didn't get the email announcement for the meetings either.
I didn't, no.
Apparently member Bliss is not on our email list.
I used to be, but I'm not. But
She's still on the list. I don't know why.
I'm going to send whomever a different email address and see if that works.
Okay.
Okay. Then I was going to say we need that so we can further the issue with that Stan Johnson brought up last meeting. So is that going to be on a future agenda to discuss that further so that we can do something about this?
Yes, in fact, so yes, there was an email sent with 2 attachments, and one of the attachments was a standard operating procedure for addressing a sanitary overflow spill or something. Anyway, it got sent, and also the reports that have been filed by the city with the DEP for the last year was also included. There were a total of 4 reports. The South Street sewer spill after during Hurricane Ian was reported to DEP. The Baker subdivision was not reported to DEP. I have an email from the acting Water Resources Manager, Kevin Cook, stating that a city employee was sent to the area where the sewer spill was reported, and he reported that there was no sewer spill, and therefore it didn't get reported. Because a citizen can't report these types of things. It has to be reported by the city. But I guess since the city employee said there was no sewer spill, it never got reported. We do have that on the agenda for discussion for next meeting. I have sewer spill protocol and recommendation from the TPC on what can be done with the sewer spill. That is on our next meeting agenda, so I don't think we need to discuss it any further tonight.
Thank you.
Brad, would it be possible for the next agenda packet to include the standard operating procedures for sewer spills and the DEP report so that everybody has it to look at while we discuss it?
Yeah, so you want to create an agenda item
Yes.
for next meeting
Yeah.
on this?
I think that was the intent, yeah. Okay, and then the other thing that I had written down on was the performance measures that Ms. Lorty pointed out to us. So that I think is enough for the agenda. We seem to be doing pretty good when we only have 2 agenda items. Because when we had the really full agendas, it was frustrating because we couldn't get them done. So is there anything else that you guys?
I'd like to clarify that last one. I think I've actually got 4 bullets on this, and I don't think we need 4 per se, but I think that we as a commission, we need to understand the city's strategic planning process and those environmental metrics that are in their strategic plan, and we need to be reviewing those and somehow integrated into that process. And we are not there, and that subject needs to be discussed. So that's bullet number 1 that I'd like to see added to the agenda. I also, getting back to Member Delgado's policy questions for TEC recommendations that are delivered to the City Council, to Planning and Zoning, or to any other board, staff, etc. When we deliver those things, I'd like to know what the process is and what we are supposed to do when that process fails.
I can answer that. I have here 5 pages of motions and requests for information to be brought to City Council in the past 6 months from TEC. And so we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how to bring these before council based on what your motions are. So that's why, like tonight, I'm asking for a very specific direction, and I can give you some recommendations on motions to see how we can bring this information to council or to someone else based on your direction. So I'm not sure, we can always try to find room for improvement for conveying what your request to council or to any other agency or department or request for any specific information. We do try our best, and we do. I think the last item, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what was being requested about, and I appreciate the conversation I had with Ms. Lorelei Thompson about that. It's very helpful. But I would recommend that your directions be very succinct as to how you want to bring this, or what you want to bring to City Council, and what specifically you're asking them to do. So that's the best I can suggest, but I don't know.
It's not about the specific, Brad. It's about the process. What happens when the process fails? What are we supposed to do?
Well, what process specifically are you referring to, sir?
Okay, well, in this last one that we had this fiasco about with the trees, our directive didn't make it to City Council, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Which directive are you talking about?
The vote that we took in the January meeting and what we had discussed and decided on that meeting was not presented to City Council at the next opportunity when the first reading was made. They were given the document that was published back in October, not what we voted on in January. So we complained about that. So the next City Council meeting, when they're doing the second reading, it again was incomplete. And it again did not include the 6 items. So it's twice now that we have made a motion to submit something to City Council, and 2 times it didn't make it through.
Let me explain what happened. And I don't think it's 2 times, sir. I think it's only 1 time. It was a mistake.
It was 2 City Council meetings.
Here's what happened. In January, you had your discussion for 4 hours. Yes, we recognize that, and you came up with several recommendations of that assessment. And then you also came up with your concept plan that was presented to you by a citizen. Before that, at that meeting in January, she presented a new version that was in addition to, or different from what was on the agenda. So I think it was just confusion as to what exactly we were supposed to be bringing to City Council, the one that was handed out to you or the one that was part of the agenda packet. And I think it was just a mistake on that part, staff member's part, of bringing it to City Council. But even what we brought to you, or what you gave us, we had to review it and really understand it to know what exactly we were bringing before City Council. So yes, it didn't get to them until the March 14th meeting with your recommendations for that concept plan. And it just so happened we tried to make sure it was on the same meeting as the Planet Geo's assessment as well. Now, I can't control what City Council's direct actions are going to be. We tried our best to explain to them what we understood of the concept plan, and we also handed out a version during the meeting that was the correct version that was pointed out to us, and we tried our best to explain it. And I believe that several members here also tried to do the same thing. Council made their decision, and they made their decision based on the information that was given to them at that meeting. So they made 2 actions. One was on that concept plan, asking staff, based on our recommendation, to allow us time to analyze it. So I'm not sure what else we could have done. We did make a mistake in not including the one that was the version that was handed out in the January meeting. We acknowledge that, and it does happen. But it did take some time for us to really digest what was given to us and make sure and understand how we can present it to City Council too. So no, sometimes your motions and your directions don't immediately go to the very next meeting of City Council.
I wasn't concerned about the very next meeting. I was concerned that what was presented wasn't accurate.
And we acknowledge that, sir.
Yeah. So how do we prevent that from happening in the future? What can we do as this board to prevent that from happening?
I think, again, just making sure your recommendations are very succinct. So I think in that case, I'm not sure what we could have done better. I think if we had a version that was on the agenda packet and what you saw and considered, then we can make amendments to it. But sometimes members of the community come to you and hand out new versions to you, it does create confusion. It's not the best process we have, but we tried our best. So at the time when we tried to bring what we thought was recommended by TC to City Council, we gave them the version that was on the agenda packet, not the one that was handed out to you during the meeting. But we did correct it at the council meeting.
So, and when that process fails, what are we supposed to do? Well, how should we handle it?
Are we discussing the next agenda, or
No,
are we doing it now?
It's whether it goes on the agenda or not.
We're past our 10 minutes. Guess we need to have another extension.
Motion to extend for 5 minutes.
Okay, all right, everybody okay with that?
No.
ahead.
I just want to know what we're supposed to do when the process fails.
You did what you're supposed to do. The chairwoman pointed out to us, and we brought the correct version to city council for that particular instance.
Yeah, they had the correct version in front of them at that meeting, and we also handed it out. We handed it out at the meeting, so they had a printed copy, and it was also in their agenda packet, the correct version. What the mayor told me to do, because I was frustrated that night, because I was watching the meeting go on without our recommendations, being discussed, which was a mistake. It was confusion when they got separated from the assessment by the city attorney to be talked about later. The mayor missed it. It was a mistake. He missed it. And so when I had lunch with him, I asked him, I said, so I'm sitting in the audience and I'm watching the thing that my committee had worked on for a long, long time and we're hoping would be discussed. I'm watching it just get passed by mistake, and I can't do anything about it because I've already had my 3 minutes at the microphone. And he said, if you see something like that happening and you're in the audience and we've made a mistake like that, if you will raise your hand, I will call you back to the mic and you can point out what happened that was a mistake. And he gave me his word that in the future, if I'm in the audience and I see something like that happening, and normally I would be in the audience if I'm not out of state, any time that a TEC matter comes up to the council. So he's given me his word that if I'm seeing a train wreck coming, if I raise my hand, he'll call me back up to the mic. And he said if you would have done that on at the March 14th meeting, I would have called you back up to the mic. And I said I didn't know I had that latitude. So that I think it's resolved in that manner.
All right. So the performance measures and targets and fails and all of that, that's on the agenda for the next one that we can start working with.
Yes.
Okay.
We have two items on the next meeting's agenda: the sewer spill protocol and a discussion by us on what we think should be done when there's a sewer spill that's not reported, and then the performance measures. Those are the two things that are on the agenda next week.
All right. This is with the city's performance metrics and how we get involved in that process. Okay.
Yeah, and if the 55 slides that were shown at the meeting, I'm sorry, I was out of town and I couldn't attend. I would have loved to have come. But if that can be emailed out to us, the slideshow that was presented, that would be great. That way we can be thinking about it.
Are you referring to the slideshow that's presented at the community meeting?
Yes.
In February?
Yes.
March.
Okay.
March 7th.
March 7th?
March 7th. You know, the secret meeting that was sort of publicized but wasn't advertised?
It was held at the senior center, I think. Is that it?
Well, that was no, I'm talking about the city council workshop.
Oh.
I'm talking about the city council workshop where they discussed the performance measures for the city.
Okay.
And those performance measures included some things that involve the environment, and we have not seen those things at all. I want to see those things, and I want to see them preferably periodically, so that maybe on a quarterly basis we can review and see, are we keeping up with what we're saying we're going to do? Do we need to increase our performance measurements? Are they too low? Is that why everything's all green, but the lagoon is dying? Because if your measurements, if your requirements are too low, then you're not going to achieve what you need to achieve, the goals that you need to set. So I want to see us somehow work our way involved in these strategic planning metrics, because that's how the city grows. And we're the oversight committee for those metrics. So we need to figure out what the city's doing, why we're not involved, and get ourselves involved in it. And that's what I want on the agenda for next.
Okay, thank you.
So what exactly what material do you want on the next agenda? You're looking for that presentation that was presented at the workshop on March 7th?
That would be a start.
Okay.
So that we can see the 55 different metrics that the city's using.
Okay.
Some of those metrics we should be involved involved in it.
I'll certainly look to see what was presented that night on the 7th. and-
Hold on guys, can I interrupt, because I've been
I
following
see.
this very closely.
So, what the city council didn't actually discuss the performance metrics. They talked about how they would like to have metrics. I'm the one that held up the performance metrics, and I can email them to you. I already did actually. They're in your inbox because I emailed them to everybody today. So the 55 performance metrics, of which we have 4 that are lagoon related, those are in the performance measures document that was not discussed on the 7th of March. The city has actually never publicly discussed it. There was brief conversation about a document, but the March 7th conversation was not that. The March 7th conversation was them talking at a higher level about their goals for the city and their objectives for the city, the boxes, if you all remember, I have a copy. So, yes, so if you're initiating something, you want to ask for the performance, and that's already in your inbox, I sent it to everyone today, but the performance measures document, you'd be reviewing those and then discussing the ones that pertain to the environment, discussing if they're adequate, and also perhaps these public inclusion measures, because that is a part of, the public being part of this. So that's what you would discuss that.
I'd like to add one thing to what Kristen is saying. It appeared at that meeting that council was also not aware of these.
That's exactly correct. They're not, this is becoming a part of the city discussion because citizens are starting to raise it, not because the city's offering it. We're starting to raise it and ask more about it. The council members were unaware. Councilwoman Stoeckel said, don't we have a handout? And he said, City Manager Lurie said, yes, but it confused people when we put it on the website. It's for internal use only, if you recall what he said. That's what happened at that meeting. So the document was downplayed. So it wasn't like there was a robust discussion there. Just want to make sure I say that for the record. You guys would be starting the robust discussion, and that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
So,
Yes, Member Delgado?
Okay, this goes back to the basic issue. The basic issue is we're not integrated into the process the city has. And that is the bottom line. And if what starts to happen, we're gonna have these discussions month after month after month and get nowhere.
we're trying.
We're trying.
It goes more than trying, It is a matter of integrating into the process. If the process does not exist, then they do whatever they do, and that's fine. Okay, that is the way it's been done before. And I've lived for many years in that environment. But there comes a time where we need to put ourselves into that integration. And go and talk for it. And if it needs to go to council and say, these are the things that we want to be integrated into in this performance map. Okay, and we pick and choose 15, 20, or whatever number there is that affects us. And we go in and say, we need to be integrated. When staff talks about it, we want to be integrated. Because it's the same thing that is happening with the canopy. It's the same thing that is happening with the trees. We approve all sorts of developments, but the trees are not talked about. The water is not talked about. The wetlands are not talked about. Okay, and that is lack of integration of what we're trying to do here. So, again, I keep talking about ever since I got into the board about integration. We need to be integrated. Otherwise, we're going to be doing this for the rest of the year, and they're going to have meetings, and they're going to have data, and people from the outside are going to bring data that we should have known, but we don't know because it was not integrated. So there comes a time where you just say, you know what, let's have a talk.
Madam Chair, I think that's the direction we're going in by asking for the performance measures to be provided so we can look at them. I think we're trying to battle upstream and go that way.
Yeah. But there's only so far the fish can go.
Madam Chair, can I, one more approach? I'd just like to make sure, because Mr. Parrish has asked to be very precise, to say that the items that I sent to you today would compile a great agenda packet. That's my email with descriptions. It includes the strategic objectives, right? The city's high-level goals. It includes the performance measures, this is the 55 performance measures, and that one last sheet that has my analysis of 3 years of these performance measures not changing. And I have it all compiled into one document. So if you could recommend to Mr. Parrish that we start with that document as a basis, you guys would have a great, a good foundation for a discussion. So I just don't want it to get lost in translation, just like we've just had. But those documents would be a great document to study, and I have it compiled in one document that I can send. But it's all Mr. Parrish has a copy right now because I copied all the city council members and Mr. Parrish on it today. So I just wanted, so that we don't have a partial discussion.
I'm fine with that, and I'm sure that Mr. Parrish would welcome not having to spend a lot of staff time on this. So it's all there. You guys okay with that?
So just to be clear, I'm going to include a create agenda item, and it will be about, sorry, give me one moment. I'm going to include Ms. Lorty's email, and she has 4 attachments, or 3 attachments, I believe.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And the email is dated, was sent actually today at 11:26 a.m.
That sounds exactly right.
Okay. And so the topic is aligning TEC recommendations
Yes.
to the city's annual strategic planning process.
Yes.
Okay.
That's that, and then these are the 3 attachments, the performance measures, the high-level ones, and then your citizen analysis of them changing over time, one document. I have even made it into one PDF so that I can send it out to everybody, so that we all have the same playing field. I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And we appreciate all your hard work, and I know that staff appreciates not having to look all that up and provide it for us, so thank you for making it easy. All right, does anybody have anything else? Member Perez?
Yeah, I'd like to come back around to the issue of our motions, which I think Brad was trying to point out that I don't think we provide enough specifics. Some 8 months ago or so, you weren't here, Mike wasn't here. We had a discussion, I'm trying to remember, I think it was TEC, but it could have been P&Z. Rice, Woody, brought up a really interesting point, and I was trying to find my notes on it, and it could be because it was part of the P&Z meeting, of how to tease out the details of the motion so that when it gets communicated, it's not lost at council. And when council gets presented with the information, they know what's being presented to them, rather than, just vague notion that, which is, I think, what's been happening a lot.
Yeah, I think we shoot ourselves in our own foot, by not being very specific. So we're gonna try to change that habit and be more specific. And Ms. Parrish, I appreciate you coming to the meeting tonight. Again, we're very sorry that anybody's feelings got hurt at the last meeting. We're glad to see you, and we really appreciate your efforts to keep us focused.
Thank you. We'll try our best to make sure we convey what your wishes are to the city council.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes. Second. Make it so.
Get out of